welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to discuss about HTTP options and trace request methods. So in previous sessions we have already discussed about get and head, and we also had a discussion on put, patch and post APIs. So let's start this discussion for HTTP options and trace method. Normally you will not see HTTP options and trace being used in multiple places, or you will also not be seeing and actually creating this or implementing these methods. So but today, since we are on the journey of discussing the HTTP methods, let's go ahead and discuss and start on HTTP options method. So options method, as the name suggests, is going to give us different sort of capabilities that a web server or an intermediary is allowing for you to be able to send HTTP requests, which means basically in case of your Spring Boot app, the API server or your postman or anyone who is testing your web server can hit different endpoints and understand what all requests are there that you are supporting. For example, if we go to the postman and maybe just do an HTTP options API request on demo employee, we know that there are certain endpoints that are exposed, or there are certain methods that we have written. It could be put, patch, post, get, and head that are available in the employee controller, and we are not giving any IDs as such. And let's see what happens. Let me just turn on the application once. So what we are expecting is it should return us the response of all the HTTP methods that are supported by our application. So yes, so body is empty, and if we go into the headers, it is showing us a key called allow, and it says that get, head, post and options are supported by slash demo slash employee path. And let's add a id as well, so that will also improve, or add the patch and put HTTP methods in the allow key header that is being returned. So this is what HTTP options does. It tells you as a caller what all request or HTTP method a particular web server or intermediate uh, person or intermediate device is supporting for you to send request to. Before 4.2, basically this the way it works is, so we send a request to dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet extends from a framework servlet. So framework servlet is the base servlet for Spring Web. Okay, so before 4.2, the default behavior of applications was that options HTTP method was disabled. But after 4.2, the dispatcher servlet itself is setting the default dispatch option request to true, and then it is forwarding it to the framework servlet. So basically what happens, the framework servlet will have a do service method, which its subclass, in our case, dispatcher servlet, will extend and implement. So let's check how this is working. Let's quickly go to the dispatcher servlet, and maybe first let's check how the dispatcher servlet is extending from a framework servlet. As I said, this is the base servlet for Spring Web. So there are a couple of constructors that are there for dispatcher servlet. One second. So there are two constructors. One takes no argument. Second one takes the web application context. So when you go to the dispatcher servlet constructor, it is calling super, and then it is setting the dispatch option request to true. Also, let's check the second constructor as well. In this also, it is setting the dispatch option request to true. But when you see where is this particular method available, you can see the code directly jumped into the framework servlet. So the framework servlet is setting the dispatch option to after 4.3 version. Okay. Now this options method is by default will be available to you. There are certain use for this option methods, but normally it's also a recommendation or security vulnerability to disable this option method, because it is also exposing all the endpoints that are available. So it's not directly a security vulnerability, it's basically leading to one. For example, in our case, it was telling us get, put, patch, post options are available in your server. So a potential hacker might look at this information and start to send some more malicious requests for each and every request method that we are supporting. So maybe patch, get, hit, put, and options. Okay, so but again, option is not directly a security vulnerability, but it can lead to one. There are also certain requirements which are required or basically require the options HTTP method to be available. Some of them being the course pre-flight request. Okay, and the same we can see that it is supported in the framework servlet as well. So go to, so you can see the protected do option methods in the framework servlet checks that the whether the dispatch option request is enabled, and it also confirms that if the request is a pre-flight request. So there it's not always important to just go ahead and disable it. There can be certain scenarios where we would require options method to be enabled on our server, and we can see how that is linked with the framework servlet as well as the dispatcher servlet. Okay, we already have seen how we are able to invoke the HTTP option method without actually creating any controller class, sorry, any methods in our employee controller. Okay, and not only that, let's also invoke a few requests on the demo endpoint. So you can see that the demo is the basic dispatcher servlet, and it is also able to give you certain responses. Okay, and then let's try to invoke it on the employee, or maybe invoke it on the hello. Okay, so hello is allowing you to give a response of get head and options. Hello 2 is also available with us, which is giving the same responses. And we already seen the employee and the employee one, which is just a path variable that we are appending. Okay, so all these requests are working without actually creating an options, request mapping in our controller or in our entire application. So it is quite similar to the head HTTP request method. Okay, going ahead, let's see how the trace is working. Trace and options are bit similar, whereas options will tell you what all HTTP methods are allowed. Trace is actually used for debugging purposes, wherein the request that you are sending to a server, in case the trace is supported, it will send the same responses back from the server. Normally, trace is disabled by default. Okay, so even in your applications, if you try to invoke a trace request, it will not work. So let's see it first once. Yeah. So the 405 method not allowed is what is returned back to us. But here you see something more interesting. It is also saying that ahead, delete, post, get options and put is allowed. Okay. So it is kind of going to the replication context. It is understanding, or maybe going to your dispatcher so that it is understanding that this particular endpoints are already available, and it is still returning us back the response, but it is actually not working the way it is supposed to return. And mostly you will see, I will also see some examples here how different applications have disabled the trace. But for our application, we need to now start looking into, if you want to enable this trace. Okay, so the first step of doing this is there's a property that we have to enable in our Spring Boot application. The property is called Spring MVC dispatch trace request equal to true. Okay, so this particular property is set to false by default. Okay, and we need to enable it to true. This is the first step, and you can also see the body. There's no change as such. So the trace, demo error, user agent, accept, cache control, postman token host, accept encoding connection. These are details or metadata are available for us. The content type is message HTTP, and allow the response has still not changed. Okay, so this is the first step and not the last step for enabling the trace. Next, this basically allows you to, tells the entire application context that you are allowing the dispatch trace request. Now, what we also want to do is we want to have a controller that is defined for us that, tells us whether we are receiving the request or not. So I already have a controller that I created, just uncommented it. Okay, so in case we are able to reach to the application, we should be outputting a trace in the log. Okay, so this is not doing anything logical. I just created this particular method. Now let's try to again invoke this. Okay, so we were able to invoke it, but you can see there is no request that is that is received on your controller class. Okay, so there is something still wrong. In our case, there has to be a connector that is going to get the HTTP trace request, because we are using embedded Tomcat web server. So for that, you need to make some more configurations. Again, I've done it before this particular meeting. Okay, so this is the configuration that we have to do. We have to add a customizer, which is a connection connector customizer, and we have to set this allow trace to true. So this is the last piece of configuration that we have to do, so that the request from can actually reach to your employee controller. Let's try to again invoke this request. Okay, now you can see it is returning as a 200. Okay, it's not erroring out, and also there is a blank array that is available here. So what implementation I had done is I am returning the list of employees. Since the application was started, there are no employees as such. So let's create a couple of employees. Now again invoke the trace request. So you can see that the trace was returned, the entire response was returned, and it was returned from demo employee, and all the other details are available for us. Okay, so trace again, as I said, is for debugging purposes, and you can have certain issues with trace as well. So there's a security vulnerability associated with trace called cross-site tracing or cross-site tracing attack. This vulnerability occurs when an attacker is able to trick a user's browser into making a trace request to a website and then reading the sensitive data included in the response, such as cookie and authentication tokens. So the impact for this particular issue would be session hijacking, cross-site scripting, and information disclosure. So let's see how it is working. We didn't really implement much around the trace, but we have multiple examples available with us. So see how it is working for different applications. So let's first invoke a trace on HTTP Stack Overflow. So you can see it is giving some information for the server. It is telling what sort of server is this. This also has some custom headers associated that are returned in the response. There are no cookies and there's no body. Sorry, there is body, but there is no information that is relevant to us. We'll see how others are also populating some more information in the body. So with Stack Overflow, we saw that the server was returned in the response header. Now for Wikipedia, you can see there is a lot of information that is being returned. The server is being returned xcache status. So this is an old way of adding custom uh, headers, and there are server timing, strict transport policy. There are a couple of cookies are also being returned here, and we'll see the cookie ones. So there are two cookies that were returned. So this is the part where someone can do a session hijacking. Someone can steal more information that they can be able to send trace requests from your browser. Let's see what happens for Amazon. Okay. So Amazon is also sending some information, custom information, X Amazon, CF POP, and CFID, and CloudFront is the server. And when you see the body, it is saying that the request cannot be satisfied, and there was configuration error, and it was generated by CloudFront, and the request ID to track this in case you require it, it's also given to you. Duolingo is one of the websites that is hosted on Amazon. So you can see the server is AWS ELB. Okay, and the ELB is basically elastic load balancer that is being returned, but it still gives you a lot of information without actually being able in do anything to the server. Again, Netflix it is completely blocked. It is giving us a 400 bat request, and you can see the body that we are returning is blocked. For LinkedIn, it's returning a 999 request denied, and some more information that is available. There are a couple of cookies that LinkedIn has sent to you, and then there are some other details such as denial code, denial reason code, some custom headers, date, content length, and content type. Finally, the redcross.org, you can see a difference here as well. So it is hosted on Microsoft IIS, and it is powered by ASP.NET. Again, Microsoft, the redcross.org is sending couple of cookies back to you. Okay, the body is also available. The page you are looking for cannot be displayed because the header value in the request does not match the configuration settings. And you can see a 501 not implemented. Again, the HTTP code that every other website is returning is different. Some are returning not allowed, some are returning bad requests, some are returning 501 not implemented, some are returning 999 request denied, and so on. So this is about HTTP options and HTTP trace method.